Good evening, everybody. It's your boy, Alex McCarthy with My Wrestling Daily. But today, I have a different co-host, Louis Dangor. Out in comes SP3 from True Hill Heat, stateside in New York. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, good sir. It's another Wednesday, and I'm happy to be back with you.
I mean, that's it. Every Wednesday, SP3 is in the building. You know Steph Chase will be here on the Thursdays to mop up the Wednesday night wars. And, of course, Louis will be either side of SP3 and Steph. So, man, really looking forward to this one. We've had some great super chats in the past few days. We had some great videos in. I haven't had any roast potatoes yet, SP3.
What's going on? I saw all these analogies for rate the spud, Raider Tater, Taters of the Lost Ark. I saw a couple of good ones. I think it was Daniel Price. I've been liking all of our usual suspects in the chat. They are awesome with their analogies.
Yeah. I went back and enjoyed a lot of that yesterday. Man, I never thought I'd be using my own wrestling show to showcase my roast potatoes. How did this happen? I don't know. Maybe it'll be the Tuesday show when people have had their roast on a Sunday, right? Midweek roast is asking a lot. Maybe that's the problem.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's a weekend type of snag, not a midweek, so we'll see.
Well, let me tell you something, man. And Ron Bumby is on the money. Got any thoughts about WWE's plans for The Fiend and Bliss, Aleister Black, AEW, anything for that matter? Send us a super chat and we will make sure they are read out. Indeed, we will. Any amount. And that's been my favorite part of the show since we got going here. Yesterday was a great edition of that where guys were just firing in their hot takes and their opinions. My favorite part of the show. So keep it going, guys. You are a bunch of good eggs. And I don't say that. Without any real meaning, SP3. If you're a good egg, I'm saying you're a good egg. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention you can get us on podcast at this point. I say it every show. Thank you to the loyal ones who tune in here. But of course, if you want us in your ears while you're going about your business, please do get us at all your podcast places. That'd be Apple, Acast, Spotify, all of the good and the bad. So my good eggs, go ahead and do that. And of course, like, share, and subscribe. Wrestle2, hovering around 30K. I haven't seen if we've actually made it yet. We might have done, but we were like 30 away yesterday. So hopefully you give us a like, share, subscribe. Of course, you've got Alex's Wrestling Daily 4 times a week, but there's tons of other stuff from the good guys like Mr. Davis and Pete Quinnell and Luke Owens and all of the crew. So without further ado, SP3, let's jump into a little bit of news. Oh, before we do that, the resident cocaine fiend, Uptown Avondale, says Alex loves when you give him money. I don't get the money, Uptown. I wish I did. Brother.
Everybody's got a price.
Yeah, mate. Maybe I can make a side hustle like a super chat. I don't know, but I'll have to look into that stuff. But anyway, let's talk some news to begin with, man. And I just want to preface anything we say by acknowledging that the US election is on, but I don't personally have anything to say about it. I'm not a politics guy. I'm here in the UK anyway. I wouldn't throw stones at glass houses because the state of us is unbelievable as well. But it must be dominating you at the moment, SP3.
It is. And this is not the first time today that I heard someone call themselves not a political person.
Well, you see what I'm doing? Do you see that? You know what the difference is, though, between the two statements is that I didn't go on to make a political statement following that.
Or donate any of your money to campaign. So I give you credit on 2 forms.
I don't have 3 bags, and if I did, I would not be chucking $3,000 at Donald Trump. But there we go. That's another thing for another matter. Anyway, I hope anyone from America who's tuned in, that everything goes the way you hope. That's the best I can say on the matter. Moving on to wrestling, because that's why we're here. We've had some nice stuff today, man. We've had some what I wouldn't call reports, but Zelina Vega was on Lillian Garcia's Chasing Glory podcast, which, by the way, for anyone who hasn't checked it out, go do that, because the list of guests she has and the stuff she gets out of them, it can be really personal and great. People really open up to her. So I would really recommend that after you watch my show, obviously. And yeah, so Zelina was talking about that Andrade was actually meant to drop the US title to Aleister Black during his, Aleister Black's tear on Raw, and they were meant to tease that Zelina was conflicted. They was meant to allude to the fact that yes, indeed, they are together in real life, and kind of bring that to the screen. Unfortunately, I believe Aleister Black, of course, was injured, and shortly after, Andrade ended up with a violation. So it didn't come to pass. Now, different brands, they are, aren't they? Andrade on Monday, right?
Yeah, I think no. Well, Andrade, I believe is on Raw, and Zelina is on SmackDown with Aleister.
There you go. Okay. It's almost as if that was done so what do we think, man? Let's talk about quickly where Aleister Black is now. Paul Heyman quite clearly values him, gave him the long, unbeaten run. Where are we at now, though? He's on. Oh, could no one hear me then?
You were kind of low. You were kind of low.
Okay, my bad. Yeah, I think I can still hear. I think I had my finger on something. Sorry, guys. But so Aleister Black, right? Paul Heyman clearly had plans for him, right? Clearly had vision for him. He gave him the long run, and I think it's fair to say that it didn't quite work out with the AI stuff, and now he's on SmackDown. Where do we go from here?
I'm not too sure because Aleister Black as a heel, I didn't really get it. To me, honestly, the way he was turned was kind of weird, coming off of getting his eye tried to pull out the socket by Seth and Murphy. So it was kind of weird for him to not even look for revenge on them and then go and attack KO. So I think it's going to be kind of awkward for now because he has to find the right babyface partner for him. I mean, Daniel Bryan is a great person to go after because you're always going to get heat if you attack Daniel Bryan, but he seems to be more positioned against Jey Uso and our tribal chief, Roman Reigns. So,
our tribal chief, sure.
Absolutely. Our tribal chief, the tribal chief, your tribal chief, everyone's tribal chief. So I'm all for that because I've always wanted Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns to have another go at it. But we're going to see how that transpires. So, Kevin Owens, he's already been down that route. Who else is there? What other top baby faces is there for him to feud with? That's kind of the question right now. But I think it would have been great if he did have that feud with Andrade on Monday Night Raw. But it kind of feels like to me that matchup, the Raw after WrestleMania between Aleister Black and Apollo Crews, is kind of like their fortunes kind of went like ships in the night, and they went crossing, and Aleister Black was on his way up the ladder while Apollo Crews has been down the ladder for like the past 4 years. And then that one great match that they had over 20 minutes on a Monday Night Raw is shot out Apollo Crews up the ladder past Aleister Black. So it's kind of weird to me, but I just haven't had that same vibe for Aleister Black like I did in NXT for quite some time.
Yeah, I got told a few months ago that Vince liked the performer Aleister Black very much. Like, he rates him. It was the character that he didn't think really had that many legs, and I think that's a bit rough on Aleister because I actually thought there was a lot of things you could have done to explore him. He was quite mysterious and dark, and you could have took that in a multitude of directions, but instead they, for some reason, lumbered him in with the Eye storyline. I don't see how that correlates to anything that he's doing. And it's a shame because his talent is right there. You could put him in a match with anybody and he'll give you a good match. And sometimes that's a curse, as we've learned with the likes of Cesaro and so on. But I honestly think Aleister Black has the intangibles to be like a top star. And I think at the moment they've kind of put him there without a plan, and they'll wait for something to open up for him. They'll try and slide him in somewhere, and it's a shame because I honestly think he's somebody you should be utilizing, at the top of the program. I even, people probably forget this. I even loved him and Ricochet as a tag team. You look where they both are now, and you think probably could do with going back together. Like, not a lot is going on. I know they're on different brands, but I mean, you look at why they were separated in the first place to go on their journeys. probably could have kept him as is for a while. Certainly something you can return to, or make that a feud because there's history and stuff. But at the moment, both of them are kind of just drifting along aimlessly. I feel for Aleister Black, and it would have been good for him to get that first title reign, and having that story with Zelina, and that could have gone in some cool directions. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like that it's going to happen imminently. But speaking of Zelina Vega, I really hope good things for her too, because the women's division is kind of, I want to say it's stacked, but it's split, right? Like, we've got great women, but they're kind of like, So I feel like there is room for someone like Zelina, and you would argue that she's probably the best talker. I was about to say in WWE. She's certainly the best female talker in WWE for my money.
I would say she's definitely up there. I would put her right along with like Bayley. Bayley's probably my favorite, but yeah, I would say Zelina and Bayley are right there for the best female talkers in WWE.
You can't say that about saying ding dong.
Hello. I just love Bayley. Bayley just gets her character so much, and that's why she's my favorite. But Zelina Vega is right up there with her. The other part of the interview with Lillian Garcia that I enjoyed the most was the fact that Triple H thought her and Andrade were in a relationship together, and he was like kind of taken aback by finding out that she was with Aleister Black. He's like, Andrade and you? She's like, no, we're friends. I'm actually going out with Aleister. So
how does Triple H not know that either? Because he knows Charlotte Flair and Rick very well. Like, come on, man, he must know. Maybe they weren't together then. I don't know. Because when they were, it's probably in NXT we're thinking about this.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense, I guess. But I mean, to be fair, I didn't, but I think a lot of people would have made that assumption just based on the presentation. Like, that's typically how it is, right? A female manager, there's normally that connection there some way. Like, who was Eminem, Melina, right, back in the day, who was actually with Morrison at the time. And, I know that's just one example, but you can forgive some fans, and apparently Triple H for making that mistake. Man, I'll tell you what, I want to start early. I want to start hot with a hot take. And the reason I do this as well is because this guy, SP3, we do. It's our very own Chris G.
This is your boy Chris G, and this is my extremely hot, heated take. Ilya versus Walter, or Volter, was 4 stars at best. Oh yeah.
First of all, it's not or Volta. It is Volta. Okay? There is no either or. It is Volta. And listen, 4 stars is still, very highly regarded. That's still a great match. So I'm not going to take that to heart too much, Chris G, with your joints and jabronis. But what I will say is that I think it stands alone totally as its own type of match this year. I've said this on the show this week. There's nothing else like it this year. It's the best match of the no fans era. It's classic guy who loves beating someone up versus guy who, loves taking it apparently. And it's the battle of wills. I just thought it was amazingly well done. That's just my opinion. So for me, if we're looking at like what 5, if Pentagon and Omega is 5-star, right, in Dave Meltzer's book, I don't see how Volta and Dragunov isn't, because one of them was like a master of their own. One of them was more like art than the other.
I agree with that point of it. I am closer to Chris G than I am to Dave Meltzer on the rating. I don't think it was a 5-star match. I feel like a 5-star match is a perfect match, and over the years, I feel like it has some type of impact. So I think it's very close. Honestly, it's like right in like 4.5 stars. But if
it's not perfect, what's wrong with it?
If it had fans and it had a different
outcome,
yes.
Come on.
No. I'm not saying it's their fault. I'm just saying that it would have been a perfect match with fans and with Dragunov winning. I think okay. Volta getting the victory, it kind of, brought you back down. Whereas when Volta beat Tyler Bate, I thought that was the right outcome. I didn't think Tyler Bate had to beat Walter, and I felt like that match was better, mainly because they also had a crowd. So I'm not judging it on just the crowd. I think the outcome has something to do with it, why I don't give it 5 stars. I've seen 5-star matches, but I've never really seen one without fans, to be honest. I never thought a perfect match is a match with no fans involved. So I think the fans add to a match like that, and I think it would have made it 5 stars with the same type of match, just with a different outcome and with fans there. It's perfect to me. But I think it's a fantastic match. It stands on its own. I agree with Meltzer to a point. It's probably the most brutal non-street fight or no disqualification match in WWE history. I think Cactus Jack and Triple H from Royal Rumble 2000 is probably the most brutal I've ever seen, but that was a street fight.
Weapons.
So this is different. This is totally different. And a lot of that has to do with Walter is probably the most physical, intense performer in professional wrestling. He's right up there with Minoru Suzuki and Tomohiro Ishii to me when it comes to just how physical and how stiff as a horse. Shouts out to your jobber JJ.
Yeah.
Stiff as a horse they work. So I give Walter a lot of credit for that. And I've seen Walter have 5-star matches. I just don't think this was one of them.
I do. And the reason I'll counter that is because I think actually on the reason why you're saying it's not or one of with the fans, I actually feel like they used that to make that an integral part of the match. They made the hard hitting, the brutality of it all, and the fact that you could hear everything. They actually used that to their advantage to make the match more impactful, to tell their story even better. That's just my opinion on that. And I feel like in terms of using those surroundings, if we're talking like in 2020, what is a 5-star match, then to me that they did everything. Not only did they cope with the circumstances, they actually used them to their advantage. So for me, that's just my take. But of course, wrestling is subjective, and that's totally fine. I think we can all appreciate it was bloody good. So and Chris G, we saw the handsome fellow on the screen there. SP3, alert everyone to this Joints and Jabroni Maniac and how you know him.
Yes, check out Chris G. He's on the True Hill Heat YouTube channel with Joints and Jabronis, where he reviews all the botches and jabronis in professional wrestling every single month with his lovely assistant, Mary Jane. So he has an awesome show. He also does a review for WWE NXT and AEW Dynamite over on that YouTube channel called Wednesday Night Warriors with Romeo Anthony Colon. So this guy is a hilarious, and he has a lot of hot takes. And I think he's picked AEW as the better show for like 53 weeks straight. So he is biased, by the way, but he is my good friend.
Yeah, just to qualify the statement there. No, I must say I was on a pod, the True Hill Heat, with SP3 and Chris G, and I decided I liked the guy in about 60 seconds of him talking. He's just very infectious, good guy. So give him a chance, man. Check him out, without a doubt. First super chat of the night. Welcome, Metal Bear. Thank you very much, my friend, for dropping in that super chat. I don't know how this company has talent like Andrade, Mustafa. How do I say it, SP3? He gets heated about this. Mustafa Ali.
Yes.
Mustafa. Don't get it wrong, man.
Mustafa.
He'll call you.
Yes.
Aleister Black, Keith Lee, and Chad Gable, but keep putting titles on guys like R-Truth and Randy Orton. Metal Bear, I understand your point, but don't be out here dragging R-Truth and Randy Orton to make a point. Come on. I like R-Truth for what it's worth, and I think Orton's a generational talent. But to your point, there's a lot of great talent there, man. I've been beating the drum about Chad Gable for so long. I challenge anyone to go back and watch him, what he used to do in NXT. His mat-based stuff is unbelievable. He's not just, you've seen him kind of little guy, strong, German suplexes. Like, he's got that, man, but his technique is honestly unbelievable. The amateur background and how he incorporates it into a match. I wish WWE would let him do that. I really do.
I also feel like he has so much charisma that they haven't really capitalized on since he's been called up to the main roster. Like the backstage stuff between him and Jason Jordan when they first made American Alpha, I saw that kind of spark in him, that kind of Kurt Angle dorky charisma. So I think that they haven't really capitalized on that. And I honestly will agree with our good friend Adam Blampier he would have made a perfect illegitimate son of Kurt Angle instead of Jason Jordan.
I think they honestly ended up doing it to swerve because it made too much sense. That's what I think. I think that probably was the idea, and then they were like, people will spot that coming, and they went the total opposite direction with Jason Jordan. But I don't know, man. Like for me, Chad Gable's got all the talent in the world. He's there to be utilised. He's literally right there. If WWE let him slip through their fingers, he's the kind of guy that could go to Japan and seriously would do amazing things. I mean that. I would stand by that comment. Mustafa Ali is another guy that I've harped on about for so long. Said that he deserves so much more. It's crazy that they could have him factored in to challenge and possibly win the title. What are we talking about now? 18 months ago.
Yeah.
And then here we are, and they had nothing for him for so long, and then they've kind of just given him retribution to save themselves, as much as anything else. Not really doing it for Ali, and here we are. So it just shows you how hot and cold they can go. Aleister Black the same. Keith Lee, I've heard tremendous things about Keith Lee. Like after Orton put him over clean, a couple of guys reached out to me and said about how they had actually witnessed. Vince and others telling Orton to make Keith look great, and that was the mission, and they wanted to push him hard. And where has he been since? Like Andrade, the same. When he was first coming on Raw, and he had that. Remember the ladder match with Rey Mysterio where like Rey nearly died, and I was like, man, he's on a tear. He is right there. But there's a common theme with pretty much everyone you've listed there, except for Mustafa Ali, because I feel like his promo game has been great. Chad Gable is one of them guys who, like, in the ring has loads of charisma. His facials, the way he does, goes about his business and reacts to stuff. On the mic, still figuring it out, I think, right? He doesn't have that kind of natural heat or flow on the microphone. Aleister Black as well is very kind of character driven. And when Vince McMahon is sending you to change that character, again, bit of a feeling out process. I think Keith Lee's only just finding his voice too. And Andrade, of course, as we know, only speaks a little bit of English. I do believe he's got a lot better, but he only speaks a little bit. So I feel like instantly, like someone like Angel Garza, who also I am huge on, feel like he's got all the charisma and talent in the world. He'll leapfrog a guy like Andrade just because he can talk. So it's you have to remember, everyone, we're living in a Vince McMahon world.
Yes, in the eyes of a 70-year-old man that
75.
75. Sheesh. 75-year-old man that seemingly does not really know always what his fans want to see. This is how he views all these people. But like I said, like Chad Gables has shown before, he has charisma and like the backstage stuff. Andrade just has his own particular type of charisma himself. And I agree with you. Those matches with Rey Mysterio, especially the ones on SmackDown when Rey first came back to the company, I just thought Andrade was going to get shot to the moon and that he was going to get a main event push, but it just wasn't in the cards. And I thought the same thing about Keith Lee. Yes, I agree with you on this.
10 best knows we will get stiff as a horse on a shirt one day. He knows. We will. And Keith Lee, I was 10 ahead of everybody, and I was like, he beat Randy Orton. They're gonna give him the big push. He's gonna be in the main event. Randy Orton's gonna win the WWE title, and then he's gonna feud with Keith Lee for the title. That's gonna elevate him, and we're still waiting. So I'm hoping that him being on Team Raw at Survivor Series is going to continue, the trend that we started last year with Keith Lee breaking out at Survivor Series, but we just have to wait and see. And they were going to push Keith Lee to the moon! And unfortunately, I honestly think that things changed. Like The Miz becoming Mr. Money in the Bank is not a well thought out decision. I think that's only a month or two old, perhaps. And I think all of this has had a knockdown effect, which has pushed Keith Lee out of the picture. Because originally, I have to imagine that it was going to be Keith Lee, Drew McIntyre, Randy Orton. That was going to be the title picture. Now you got the Fiend in that mix, and you got the Miz, and it's just kind of edged Keith Lee out of the picture a little bit. And it's fine if you book him well and you find a story for him, but is not going to be the immediate thing that we all thought, I guess. So anyway, let's pivot back to some news. Mike Johnson of PW Insider is saying that Alexa Bliss and Bray Wyatt, of course, the Fiend, who we were just talking about, are being presented as baby faces. That is how they're internally thought of in the company. I guess it's worth clarifying from Johnson's perspective. I don't really class that as news. I think it's quite obvious they're baby faces in many ways, especially who they're targeting. And I know that they're kind of darker characters, but I do think they're kind of very popular, and if there was a crowd right now, they'd be getting popped for sure. And I think even the crowd noises they've piped in for the Fiend since SummerSlam and whatnot have all been positive. So it's I think that makes all the sense. How they book them as baby faces in ring is when it gets tricky.
I think the confusion is more because of, you got Alexa Bliss, where she's seemingly starting a feud or still continuing a feud with Nikki Cross, who is definitely a babyface. So
yes.
I think that's a little bit of the confusion. Then you have the Fiend kind of with that 2-week feud with Kevin Owens, who is definitely a babyface. But I agree with you. Ever since they've been on Monday Night Raw, the Fiend has taken out Retribution, who are definitely heels. He's been targeting Randy Orton, who is definitely a heel. But I think that's where they needed the clarification that, yes, they are baby faces. But I totally agree with you. If there was fans in attendance, the Fiend would probably be the biggest baby face on Monday Night Raw. And we seemingly saw basically...
After Drew.
We'll get to that. But I think that the Fiend has been like the most entertaining part of Monday Night Raw consistently since he's came over. And I think that we saw a double turn at SummerSlam or before SummerSlam with Braun Strowman turning heel and the Fiend becoming a babyface. But they just haven't really gave us that one moment where people are going to be like, okay, that was his babyface turn. We just haven't seen that yet. So that's why we need the clarification.
Listen, I mean, was the Fiend ever heel? Like, in the eyes of the fans? This is what you have to ask yourself. Like, and I know it's the same as saying, okay, well, Roman Reigns has always been heel. Well, he hasn't, because of the way he acts. So it's a double-edged sword. You can't make the case for one and not the other. But at the same time, I do feel like WWE misbooked the Fiend, especially with that Rollins stuff at Hell in a Cell. I mean, we all know that was tragic. But they did miscast him. And I feel like they thought that Goldberg beating him was like a cool moment in Saudi, but it wasn't. Either that or they actually had the long plan. They were like, the fans will hate Goldberg winning that, and thus they will love Reigns beating Goldberg. Like, they might have done that. I don't know. But either way, man, I feel like we have to get the BS-ometer out here, and we have to give Mr. Mike Johnson the green. Do we not, SP3?
We'll give him the green light.
There he is. No BS to be seen here for PW Insider. Listen, we are, I must say, at the halfway point of the show, guys, get your super chats in. We love discussing those. Any amount we will read out on this show. And because me and SP3 will love a debate. And we're about to have one right now, because of anyone who caught yesterday's show, SP3 made the case that Kenny Omega was the best in-ring performer in 2020. His words. Where is it? Right there.
Yes. It was. He is.
No, he's not. I'm going to let you make your case, okay? And then I will provide a rebuttal as to why Drew is better. Please go ahead, SP3.
Kenny Omega has been in the best match of 2020, which was the Revolution Tag Team match with him and Hangman Page versus the Young Bucks. Arguably one of the greatest tag team matches in the history of professional wrestling. Then he was in one of the best TV matches, probably I actually wrote an article for Sportskeeda that it was the greatest AEW Dynamite match in history against PAC, the Iron Man match, the 30-minute Iron Man match, which was 3 days before that tag team match. Hang on.
Did you, I'm genuinely saying this because I'm not sure I caught what you said. Did you say it was the greatest Iron Man ever?
No, the greatest AEW Dynamite.
Okay, right. That's fine.
No.
Please go on.
I can't go that far. I know how to use my words wisely, but it was the best, one of the best TV matches of the entire year with PAC on that episode of Dynamite.
Okay.
He's had great matches with Trent on Dynamite. He's been in a great tag team match with Hangman Page versus the Lucha Bros on Dynamite. He has consistently had the match of the night on Dynamite much more times than Drew McIntyre has had the best match on Monday Night Raw. I can't even tell you one great or really good match Drew McIntyre has had on Monday Night Raw. I do feel that Drew McIntyre has had really good matches on pay-per-view. The Seth Rollins match at Money in the Bank being one, the match with Randy Orton at SummerSlam, and the match with Randy Orton at Clash of Champions. But outside of that, he's had it maybe 3 times the best match on a pay-per-view, while Kenny Omega has had one of the best matches every single time out on pay-per-view. I would say All Out is the only exception against FTR. That was below some people's expectations, but he had one of the greatest cinematic matches of all time at Double or Nothing in the Stadium Stampede.
There's 10 people in that.
Hey, Kenny Omega, they have credited him as the person who came up with a lot of the ideas. Him and Chris Jericho was basically the people that they said were the masterminds behind this because of his background in DDT in Japan. So this was his type of style with that Stadium Stampede. So he came up with a lot of the ideas, especially the finale with that one-winged angel at the top of the stadium onto Sammy Guevara. So Kenny Omega has been delivering on a consistent basis. He just had another great match against Pentagon on AEW Dynamite. So he has been more consistent with very good to great matches than Drew McIntyre. And I also disagree with you kind of discrediting New Japan. New Japan, Minoru Suzuki at 52 years old is probably having one of the best in-ring years of anyone in the business. So I think that he is right there.
You can't say I discredited New Japan.
You said because they were in lockdown.
You've used the wrong word. The discredit would be to say that New Japan was like poor. That's not what I'm doing. I'm not saying that they're out of the conversation because they're not great. Use your words correctly, SP3, if you're going to come at me, man. I'm saying that New Japan, I feel like you could only credit the best wrestler of the year for someone who's been doing it the year, right? If there's promotions that have had to sit out for large chunks, which New Japan did, then, because the quality and quantity, that is part of the criteria. You just said it yourself with Kenny Omega, right? Yeah. So you can't then say, oh, well, Suzuki, he's only worked half the year. That's the fact, right? So I take what you're saying. He's got a great body of work, and he'd be in my top 10, probably, just if you're looking at the quality in there. But I wouldn't put him above the people that have been flying the flags for WWE and AEW, who have been doing it all year long through the pandemic too, which, again, as we said with Ilya and Walter, presents its own set of challenges. You have to reward people for doing that too. And that is, if anything, harder. And I understand that the G1 and stuff, and it's been amazing. Don't get me wrong. Like I only really watched the G1 and Wrestle Kingdom and blown away. Sure, Suzuki, amazing. But I don't. I think you're being way too generous on great for Kenny Omega. Like I've seen great Kenny Omega matches, and I haven't seen many of those in AEW. If we're talking great New Japan Kenny, right? That's two different hang on, you're gonna have a chance. They're two entirely different things, right? For me, the tag matches, yeah, absolutely. I would probably agree that it's certainly the best tag match of the year, if not decade, in the conversation ever. In the conversation for best match, full stop, this year, absolutely, sure. And I feel sorry for it because it's like way back in February now, which feels like 1,000 years ago. So I'm looking at other matches like even Sasha and Bayley, and I'm like thinking, oh, it's amazing. But I know in my head that tag match was sensational. So I'm not going to take that away from Kenny. I'm not saying he hasn't had a great year. It just hasn't. I feel like if someone else had some of the matches that Kenny Omega had sometimes, they wouldn't be lauded half as much. But because it's Kenny Omega, and I'm not putting you in this category, but there are a lot of loyalists that are like, no, Kenny Omega's amazing. Like, regardless, there's like nothing you can say sometimes on Twitter. Like, no, he's amazing. Yeah, no, he is amazing. He is. Like, and yeah, the Omega Impact match, that's another one I'll grant you. Top draw. But for me, when I look at Drew McIntyre and 2020, okay, he literally came from where he was on the card, and then he had the Royal Rumble, and I understand that that's a niche match, but if you're going to include Stadium Stampede and whatnot, then I don't see why not. Yeah. Amazing performance. To have the crowd with him by the end of that, where they really, really wanted him to win it, that's no small feat, right? He comes out of that. The Brock Lesnar feud is red hot. I didn't like the WrestleMania match. Okay, I'll concede. You know, Kenny. So what's Kenny up at this point? Like 2-1, I guess, right? So like, I'll concede that. Then I know we're talking about like great TV matches or whatnot, but really, if you're the champion of the best company in the world, and when I say best for WWE, you know what I mean in terms of the money that it generates and where it touches around the world. The biggest company is probably the more free word. When you are the champion, the WWE champion hasn't actually always been someone that then has one of the best matches on pay-per-view. Drew McIntyre was doing that. He did it with Seth Rollins at Money in the Bank, right? He did it with he made Bobby Lashley interesting again, right? MVP. That was, I would say that was a 4-star match that he had with Bobby Lashley. I would say the matches with Dolph Ziggler had no right to be as good as they were because you knew who was going to win them. But if anyone sits there and tells me they weren't good matches, I honestly won't hear it because they were, right? From a technical standpoint and the way they built them, particularly the one Extreme Rules, I want to say, you know, where Dolph made his own rules at the last minute and stuff. I should know this.
He had Extreme Rules, but Drew didn't.
There you have it, right? That was well done. So for me, I feel like the reason I'm holding Drew in a higher esteem from Kenny is because he was put in the position to bat as WWE champion for the first time, and every single time on pay-per-view, he had one of, if not the best match on the pay-per-view. Bar, not Hell in a Cell, although I thought him and Randy did a good story, but I feel like the other two matches overshadowed them. Completely different matches, by the way, but I still preferred the other two. And I feel like the SummerSlam match he had with Randy is wildly underrated too. I thought that was a really, really well done. So it's one of them where I get it that what Omega does is amazing. And at his apex in terms of being the worker, sure, the argument's there and the body of work probably is in Omega's side to this point. But I feel like we're talking about 2020 and nobody has like led consistently through the months like McIntyre has. I can say every month that he's put on a great outing as like the champion or, you know, when he was leading up to it. For Omega, for me, started really hot. Then there's a bit of a gap. And I love the story that he's doing. To me, there is. Those first few months are where Puck was and the tag match, right? And then to me, it's just steady work. I don't think he had amazing work. I don't think you mentioned it yourself, the FTR tag match. I sat there so excited for that match, and it just wasn't quite. And I think, you know, the temperature, the way the crowd had reacted because of the Hardy and Guevara stuff. Like, it's not his fault necessarily. I'm not knocking either of them. They're both amazing. But yeah, I feel like even McIntyre's match with Big Show on Raw was really good, considering it's with Big Show and he managed to create that. Even Bobby Roode a few weeks ago was really good. He's had good matches with. I mean, I don't know if it wasn't this year. Actually, I was about to say Ricochet. Was it this year?
No, I don't think so.
But it was good, man. Anyway, the point my main point here is just that I feel through the months of 2020, Drew is the guy who's kept knocking it. He's kept getting up to bat for the biggest company in the biggest spotlight in the biggest spots. And to me, that should count.
I think that you're kind of you're comparing Kenny Omega to Kenny Omega, where I'm comparing.
No, I'm comparing Drew to Kenny here. I know what you're saying. The point I'm making is that people say that. Okay.
Your initial point was comparing Kenny Omega to Kenny Omega, where I had to stop doing that in 2019 because I was disappointed in his 2019 when I felt like he did have some great matches. It wasn't the Kenny Omega that I was used to from his stellar all-time years in 2017, 2018. But comparing him to everyone else in professional wrestling, I feel like he's had a stronger 2020. I feel like every month he's had a really good to great match. And I feel like for you, the FTR match was disappointing. For me and for you, you just said the Brock Lesnar WrestleMania match for Drew was disappointing.
It was.
I feel like Drew makes a stronger argument for Wrestler of the Year when you put in the fact that he is leading the biggest company in the business, that he was given a bigger spot than he's been used to, and he has drove the WWE in that number one position. He makes a stronger argument for Wrestler of the Year when you put in all those other things. But when you're just talking about in-ring output, I think that Kenny Omega is far and away number one ahead of a lot of different people. And even with the Wrestler of the Year argument, I could probably change positions and still argue against Drew McIntyre because I feel like Jon Moxley has had a stronger Wrestler of the Year argument than Drew McIntyre. But when we're just talking about in-ring output, Kenny Omega has a all-time tag team match, a phenomenal singles match with Pac on Dynamite in the Iron Man match. He's had the stadium stampede, and I'll give you the Royal Rumble for Drew, but he's had great matches on TV as well. I think that's the one that it just is the difference between Drew and Omega for me. They both have put out really good to great matches on pay-per-view, but I feel like Omega is more consistent on television than Drew McIntyre. And that's not to say that Drew McIntyre hasn't had good matches on television. He just hasn't been given the opportunities that Kenny Omega is to stand out on television. I feel like he's had strong title matches against Private Party, the Dark Order. Every single tag team that Hangman and Kenny Omega went against, they usually had the best match on Dynamite or one of the best matches. And we always talked about it at the end of the week. So I just feel that Kenny Omega has had a much more consistent in-ring output in 2020.
I mean, again, and it depends what people look for. Because when you say in-ring, there's a section of people that will go, well, you know, technical wrestling or high spots, whatever you want to say. I feel like Drew McIntyre's had a story behind every feud, and he's worked that really well into his stories that not many people could rival in 2020. That's very different to saying that he did the work that Kenny did. Do you know what I'm saying? I guess that's two different discussions, but that is kind of where I'm coming from. I feel like Drew is in every feud, every story, every match, he's made it matter, and he's put it on he's knocked him out of the park, in my opinion, on every stage. I'm not, as I say this, I want people to know that I think Kenny Omega is amazing, right? Like, he obviously is. And I don't disagree with what you said. And I love the story that's playing out with him and Hangman. That is the match I'm looking forward to the most this Sunday. I know people are saying, there's a lot to look forward to with Jericho, MJF, and Bucks and FTR. But to me, Hangman and Omega is like the money angle. You could really, I just think Page can be huge by the time they're done with that. But it's. I guess you can't. I said this to you before we came on air. You can't lose because they both have been like amazing. It's a subjective thing. I'm probably being biased just because I feel like Drew has risen to such a point this year, and again, this is where we're both judging different criteria because I'm like, yeah, well, it matters if you deliver on pay per view, and you're going, yeah, well, TV matches, quality week in, week out, which obviously does matter, consistency. They're both great. That's the answer. Oh, yeah. I think if I have to be totally transparent, and laying the debate on the table, I will give it to you. I will say, okay, like, you've made a convincing point. So I'm never gonna be above saying I'm wrong, but I'm just saying I do feel like Drew deserves some props.
I think he does. Honestly, he's the best positioned babyface in WWE since Daniel Bryan, and that's like 6 years ago when you really think about it. Like, he's presented himself in such a way that he's a star. He's putting out great matches on a consistent basis on pay-per-view. I feel like the Seth Rollins match does not get enough credit because that was probably my favorite match of the early part of WWE's year, but like I said, I just prefer Kenny Omega's 2020 in-ring output. But like I also said, Drew McIntyre deserves a lot of votes and a lot of credit for being the Wrestler of the Year for what he's done in WWE.
Absolutely. Tempest, who I'm seeing in the comments, is just spamming with his Omega love. Omega is literally in the best storyline in years this year with Hangman Page, spanning the entire year. Yes, but that is not the point I was making. The point I'm making is that Drew in every single feud has had a story woven in. That is a great long-running story, of course, but that's not what the point we were making. I do agree that is the best storyline. Apart from the Tribal Chief, I think that's my favorite at the moment. But of course, Omega and Page is getting to. Do you know what I mean? It's getting to its apex after that long slow burn. I love a slow burn. I really can't wait for it to play out. Jobber JJ, sorry Suzuki, number one wrestler of 2020. Again, it's hard to argue. I told you why I'm not going to do that for me, just because I feel like you should have wrestled the entire year. But the body of work's there, SP3, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's why I had to mention Suzuki. I used the wrong word. I will say that discredit was a strong word and I shouldn't have said that. But I had to show love to Suzuki because 52 years old, I saw him go move for move with Will Ospreay in the G1. He had, before Walter and Ilya Dragunov, the best empty arena match I saw all year was Suzuki versus Nagata in the New Japan Cup 2020.
Yo.
And that was right after the whole lockdown. And I just feel that even with 8 months of the year, Suzuki is going to get a lot of votes for being the best in-ring performer of 2020.
So just to confirm, SP3 has won the inaugural Wrestling Daily debate for Kenny Omega Worker of 2020. And I will say, as supporting argument, I love his entrance. I like the smarkiness is amazing with the Observer stuff as well. Like, it's amazing. It really is. Let's get to another hot take, SP3. We've got one more in the chamber, and it is from Kenny Omega's biggest fan, Tempest.
What's going on, guys? This is the Quizzlemania fact checker Tempest coming at you with a hot take, and that is, I believe, one of the worst characters in all of wrestling since 2014 has been Bray Wyatt. His character prior to losing to John Cena was fantastic with the cult leader status, but since then, all of his promos have just been babbling nonsense, building to matches that you don't care about seeing. He has very good delivery, and he's very smart in putting together his material, but as a character, what is the purpose of the Fiend? He's just mindless destruction.
I mean, first of all, his dog is so cute. I couldn't stop looking at it. He put the dog on Quizzlemania the other day, and I literally couldn't stop waxing lyrical about how cute it was. Anyway, I'm going to get the dog off the brain. I want to buy one so bad. The Fiend, Tempest does make some good points there. I don't know if I like it though. Like I'm a big Fiend fan, but I can understand where he's coming from. Is what I'm trying to say. SP3. Like, I feel like the Fiend's agenda is normally to right the wrongs of who he has faced before. Right? You've got Bray Wyatt, but the thing that makes the Fiend come by is the wrestlers that have wronged him in the past, and that's why we've had Daniel Bryan, Finn Balor, Cena, of course, at WrestleMania. And it seems now why he's looking at Randy Orton. As we all know why, with the fire, we all know what happened there. So I feel like if that is explored properly, and his goal is to change them and, you know, right the wrongs of his past, then I'm still on board with that. And I don't feel like that's totally gone away at the moment. But I do feel like WWE goes through phases of like, okay, well, what next? Like, how do we get to this point? And they kind of have him target random people that, like you said it earlier, right? KO for like 2 weeks. And it's all right, well, that's done. KO hasn't changed. So it doesn't, like, I feel like the first few months, as Tempest said, were the most effective of the Fiend. And I still find the Firefly Funhouse great. But the only thing I'll concede to Tempest here is that, yes, I do feel like along the way they have kind of meandered a little bit with the Fiend, whereas he's at his best when really in those cutting storylines, and that's what I want to see with Orton. Like, you know, there's a lot of revenge to be had there. He burned down his damn house, SP3. I want to see some stuff happen. What do you think?
And then he smashed the ashes of his dead sister. Like, yeah, there's a lot to explore there with him and Randy Orton. I can agree with Tempest to a point that it just seems like Bray Wyatt as a character has been on a downward spiral since he lost to John Cena at WrestleMania 30. And I think that a lot of the reason why people enjoy The Fiend so much is that it felt like a rehabilitation of Bray Wyatt. But I do agree that they just sometimes just don't know where they want to go with him. And it was a huge mistake. Lo mein is a hell of a lunch. It was a huge fork in the road by him feuding with Seth Rollins and going after the Universal title in the first place. I just feel like that was just the wrong move altogether, and that it was just after his first match with Finn Balor that he was already in the title picture, and it just threw him on a whirlwind. And he had the feud with Goldberg, which really happened for no reason, and there was no way he was going to change Goldberg because Goldberg's been the same for about 25 years now. So it just seems like they don't always know what they want to do with the Fiend. Right now, he's in a good position because he is going after someone that does need vengeance on. But when he doesn't have that type of like opposition that he needs, it's just directionless altogether.
We do have a super chat here as well from Bo Hill, a good friend of the show. Fiend, Bliss, Roman, don't put Fiend on TV for at least a year. Just Firefly, Funhouse, and Bliss. Bray, Bliss, Roman, Usos, Heyman. That is something I would love to see. Bo, can't argue with that, man, in terms of what you would like to see. Damn, yeah, I want to see that, of course. I want to see the Bloodline, or whatever it's going to be called, the Samoan Dynasty, or I don't know what they're going with at the moment. All of that working with Bray could be really cool, and obviously Roman and Bray have got loads of history, so it could work. Don't have the Fiend on TV for at least a year. What do you want him to do? Sit at home and pick up his cash? I mean, it's a great gig if you can get it. But I mean, I do love the Fiend and Bliss right now. So sometimes with that sort of stuff, less is more. What do you think, SP3?
I do think that the Fiend doesn't need to be on television as much as he has been. I think that if they spread it out, it becomes like a bigger attraction. And that's what Bray Wyatt should have always been. He should have always been a special attraction. But they just made him a regular character. They made him like everyone else a long time ago. And with the Fiend, they've somehow over the past 18 months made him special. And they just need to keep on that route without putting him on television so much. I'm not too sure about Bray and Roman. I was not a big fan of that when that was being rumored to be the next feud, because I was like, who loses? Roman right now should not be losing, and Bray, his whole character is all about not losing. So unless he's going to face the Firefly Funhouse Bray Wyatt or the Swamp Bray Wyatt again, I don't want to see the Fiend lose to Roman Reigns, and I don't want to see the Fiend beat Roman Reigns. So I was like, I don't want to see this feud. This is not the right time. Wait a couple of months, maybe a year, and then get back to it, but not right now.
Yeah, as Alex Smith says here, loads of history. Roman beating him at every pay-per-view, except when Harper returned that one time. Yeah, that's the point, because he wants revenge. That's what we're saying, right? That's why Wyatt would want to face him, because he lost to him so much. I mean, my main problem with the Fiend is the matches, right? Like that's ultimately what you want to see, and that should be the culmination of all of the great story work and character work that he does. I mean, we've already said the Seth one was an abomination for both of them. But ultimately, for me, like a finisher fest does nothing. I've said this before. Even the both world title matches at WrestleMania this year, nothing for me. Because it's just, what's the point of that? Getting in there and doing finishes for a couple of minutes. Like some people are like, oh, I know it's chaos and it's cool. Like, it's not for me. And the Fiend, every match really is him kicking out of finishers. You can't put him down, and then he overwhelms you. Like, okay, I mean, once you've seen that, I'm glad the red light went, but once you see that, it's a bit like, I've seen it. And how can you really get excited for that? And especially when I know that Bray Wyatt is a good worker. Like, I remember him and Bryan at the Royal Rumble, and matches. You've got plenty of good matches in his back pocket. I feel like they have to evolve that character. Yeah, they have to move it forward. And I've said this before, you have to find out what his weaknesses are. What does Alexa Bliss mean to his psyche? And you have to peel back the layers so that people can have these different matches or interactions with him. Otherwise, I feel like they're booking themselves into a corner a little bit, but I don't know, man. Here we go. Another super chat before we close out the show. A good direction for Roman after Usos is with Joe. Roman's from the True family, similar to last time. But Joe falls in line and joins the faction too. Listen, Metal Bear, again, very much welcome your super chat. I have campaigned for that loads on Twitter. I've been one of the most prominent voices before it's even a thing. I was like, wouldn't a Samoan faction be amazing? I said this to Samoa Joe at the Royal Rumble in an interview, and he was like, what? He was like, no. He really did not like the idea. And I was really surprised mid-interview that he did not like it. He basically said, why would you just put us all together just because we're Samoan? And I didn't really have an answer for him. I didn't really think about it until then. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, actually, I suppose that's mildly offensive. Like, I get what he means. It's just that kind of wrestling almost programs you to think that. Do you know what I mean? Like, and of course, with Roman and Usos, they are actual family, so it makes more sense. I would personally still think it would be cool because I think Samoa Joe has great chemistry with Roman character-wise. I know they didn't always have amazing matches, but they rubbed when they were kind of together with the Roman attacking feud last year storyline. I thought that was going somewhere great, and then Samoa Joe was kind of just dropped out of the story, which was. I mean, that whole story, we could do a whole hour on that. They mucked it up. They mucked it up terribly. But for me, I would love to see Samoa Joe back in the ring full stop, SP3. So that's one thing. If he goes with Roman, I don't think I'll get the I don't think I'll get the success I want to see for Joe. It'll just be fed. And if he fell in line, I guess that'd be cool, but it would also be a bit weird.
I think Samoa Joe has been scarred by bad stables in his TNA past, whether he was a part of Main Event Mafia or
the stable Main Event Mafia. Bite your tongue.
I mean, no, the Main Event Mafia was great. Just Samoa Joe in the Main Event Mafia was not great.
Very fair.
There was the Nation of Violence with him walking around with a machete and half of a back tattoo on his face. It was just really bad with his history there. I think the only good stable he was a part of in TNA was the Beatdown Clan, which is now the Hurt Business. So maybe if he joined something like that, I would be more into it. But Samoa Joe is the type of character. Yeah, that's a good question as well.
No, it's not. What do you mean?
I'm a fan of the Hurt Business, but that's a good question. Why does it exist? I mean,
for those listening on podcast, let's say Dustin Yoder says, "Why does the Hurt Business exist?" What do you mean? I think MVP has been knocking it out of the park. Bobby Lashley is infinitely more interesting with MVP next to him. Shelton Benjamin was doing nothing. Now he's interesting again. Cedric Alexander, he needed that new coat of paint. Like, come on now. What do you mean? Why do they exist?
They're a good stable, but it just seems like a whole bunch of cliches and slogans instead of explaining like why they're together. So I get the question of why does it exist? It just seems like a whole bunch of cliches and scripted lines like we're the Hurt Business because we're in the business of hurting people. So
no, I get that, but they have made it quite clear that they're about their business, about making money. Like green is the only color they care about, right? And they want to win titles to do that. Bobby Lashley has one. They're looking at the tag titles now. I don't think it's like that convoluted. Do you know what I mean? I get what you're saying in terms of the delivery of promos sometimes, but I think they're a welcome change of pace. I thought the moment they had with Retribution at the end of that Raw that time was super cool. Unfortunately, they haven't done that much from there because it's just been downhill for Retribution. But anyway,
the strongest stable on the main roster.
For what that's worth, sure, yeah. Matthew Gamel, thank you, my friend. The Fiend will become the new Kane in a year or two. What do you mean, demasked or like I don't know, like sincerely less muscly? I don't know. Like Kane, I thought like first. When did he debut? 97 till about 2003, basically shortly after the demasking, and he had the Shane McMahon feud and all that stuff. And then it kind of started to go downhill for me with Kane. Like he lost his aura a little bit. I still kind of loved him just because I did, but he was definitely the incarnation that was around sort of the turn of the millennium was my favorite Kane. So is that what you're trying to say, that he's going to kind of fall down a peg or two and just become another guy? What do you think, SP3?
I don't think they will go that route because it's been 18 months and usually it lasts 3 weeks with most WWE pushes and monster characters. I mean, we've seen Braun Strowman. He kind of was devalued after the Roman Reigns feud. But I think that they have been much more consistent with the Fiend, where he's not going to go down the Kane route. I think that I agree with you, but to a shorter term, from 97 through 98, I was all about Kane. And then the X-Pac feud, I was still with Kane. And then the X-Pac and Kane breaking up storyline, that's where Kane went downhill for me, honestly.
X-Pac and Tori's Christmas getaway, lest we forget.
They made Kane into a cuckold, basically.
A 7-foot cuckold. Who would have thunk it? Anyway, what a note to end this show on, because I can't believe it. The hour is up. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in once again. Thank you so much for the super chats. They were great tonight. Once again, really enjoyed that. Thank you to SP3. I will concede the victor of the first ever Wrestling Daily debate. Kenny Omega is your in-ring superstar of 2020. Thank you to SP3 in general, man. Loved it. Thank you so much. Can't wait to have you again next Wednesday. In the meantime, you can check you out where?
On the True Hill Heat YouTube channel. We got our weekly podcast on Saturdays and all great content daily over there. So check me out over there. But I'll be back next Wednesday, and maybe we got another debate in our pocket right now.
We'll have to think of one. Like at one point there, I did have to think to myself, I'm just arguing for the sake of arguing now. Like, I think I have to admit that I'm losing here. Anyway, it takes a big man to do that, all right? It takes a big man to admit defeat. So thank you once again, guys. Really enjoyed you all in the comments that have tuned in. And once again, you can catch us on podcast. If you haven't already, Spotify, Apple, Acast, all of the good ones, guys. You can go get us. And please subscribe to Wrestle2 and follow us on Twitter now. We've launched a new page there. SP3 is on Twitter. You see his handle in the top right. Make sure you hit those guys up. So once again, from us, I will see you tomorrow with Steph Chase. And